Good afternoon. Today I'll be telling you about the use of virtual reality for diversity training in the United States military. According to Brett and Jeffrey, instructional designers play a pivotal role in ensuring that employees are ready for future needs of the federal government, including the military. In order to fully understand where we're going in the future with military training, it's important to understand both the past and the present. The Strategic Plan for Advanced Distributed Learning was signed as part of an executive order by President Barack Obama in 1999. It encourages collaboration, facilitates interoperability, and promotes best practices for distributed learning. It also emphasizes research and development that focuses on mobile learning and learning analytics. Finally, it suggests more research for LMSs, learning management systems, MOOCs, smartphones, games, and virtual worlds. In the past, training in the military has focused on a national mission, typically of defense of the nation. It also has had an independently functioned perspective, so training for the Air Force, training for the Army, training for the Navy, and so on. Emphasis on the organization and long-term or long-range planning. Presently, however, the training focus is more of a global focus, and it is a total force focus, meaning the individual service components are not considered as much. In the future, the Department of Defense has a strong inclination to better understand and use advanced distributed learning. Advanced distributed learning focuses on three key elements. First is modernization, which is working towards the implementation of advanced technology such as e-learning and mobile learning. In other words, to modernize the training world in the U.S. military. Importantly, that also requires documentation or technical guidelines and policies that need to be developed for that new technology. Finally, coordination. This involves the distribution of the technology to units, squadrons, and so on around the globe. Forgive me, this is the first time I'm using Prezi, so it's a little bit cumbersome, but I hope that it's at least a little bit engaging. From here, I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the learning theories that we've discussed this semester and how I think that they apply to my current research. There are three learning theories that I think are important and applicable to the current study. First is situated learning. Driscoll describes situated learning as the process of learning by immersing oneself in real-life working environments. Learning then occurs when individuals participate in the practices of a community with other members of the community. As I was going through this reminded me of a psychology concept called encoding specificity. Encoding specificity simply says that memory is improved when information available at encoding is also available at retrieving. This was studied by Tolving and Thomas, who did some very interesting research involving scuba diving. They found that those who learned scuba diving on land and then took the test in the water did worse than those who learned scuba diving in the water and then took the test in the water. You can see how this could be very applicable to situated learning theory, and that learning the material in the environment and in the community in which one is going to actually perform those tasks would help them to remember what they learned a little bit better. While this seems like a very good learning theory to discuss in terms of military training, there are some concerns that Driscoll noted. Learners, first of all, may not be adequately prepared. This is very important both maturity-wise and emotionally. Dealing with community members is important that anybody who is going through that type of learning or training needs to be ready for it emotionally and maturity-wise. The second theory that Driscoll talks about is constructivism, which is really a collection of theories. This theory suggests individuals can learn in situations by applying already learned knowledge. This is a top-down process where individuals use knowledge that they already possess and then apply that knowledge to their environment or to challenges that they're facing, and thus learn about how to react to those situations. There are several benefits to this learning theory. First of all, there's evidence that could correspond to how people really learn through the process of active engagement. It also allows for more critical thinking and higher order learning, since those who are learning are using knowledge that they already possess. It's likely that they are better able to critically think about their situations and their responses. It should also lead to more transfer of learning since it occurs in real-work settings. And finally, an advantage it has over situated learning theory is that it integrates emotion into the learning process. This allows the learner to think more critically. The last theory I want to talk about very briefly is called transformative learning. And we didn't really talk about that this semester, but I found this through the literature search, and I thought it was really interesting and applicable to what I'm talking about here today. Basically, it allows individuals to better understand their culture, others' cultures, and the world around them by interacting with people who are different from themselves. And that presents a challenge or dilemma. It's very similar to the feeling of cognitive dissonance when one's actions and their beliefs don't match up, and it causes somebody to re-examine their beliefs or their behavior. And hopefully, it's a transformative process and they will change their behavior to better match their experiences with those that maybe they thought they had nothing in common with. And I use this learning theory particularly because of the content of the training that I'm interested in, which is diversity training. All right, so from here I think it's important to talk a little bit about diversity training. Currently, most diversity training is very short, a day or less, maybe even a few hours. It's classroom-based, lecture style. Most research says it's not very effective. However, I would like to say that the EO training in the military is actually very strong. So here you can see a couple of examples of what diversity training looks like in the military, and hopefully you can understand this is extremely unhelpful in changing attitudes or behaviors. EO training, however, happens at Patrick Air Force Base in Satellite Beach, Florida, and they have what's called the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute, where they train all of their equal employment officer, or EO officers, on how to react to equal employment claims or discrimination claims. A little bit more background on diversity training. It's really an important thing to think about because by 2050, the majority demographic of the U.S. population will be individuals who are currently racial or minority or ethnic minorities. And diversity training is a huge business. Shaw reports at least half of all mid to large size organizations have diversity training programs for their employees. What's unfortunate is that it's not very effective. There's very little evidence that shows diversity training is effective, mostly because the way it's conducted. You can see Dobin and Cayley found that any positive outcomes from short-term training sessions are fleeting and may actually increase negative affect towards outgroup members. So oftentimes diversity training leads to cynicism, particularly when it's mandated and involuntary. Future training, what I'm going to be talking about next, I believe will involve more technology. It's going to go out of the classroom, particularly when talking about training military members who are deployed worldwide. And that's where virtual reality comes in. Virtual reality refers to an experience in which the user is immersed in a simulated reality, different from augmented reality, and that the user of augmented reality is not completely immersed, but interacts with 3D, interacts with alternate reality, I guess is the best way to put it, objects in their environment, often 3D types of objects. There are three basic types of virtual reality: immersive, semi-immersive, and non-immersive. With immersive virtual reality, the user is completely immersed in the virtual environment. This takes very specialized equipment and can be quite expensive. Semi-immersive is just like it sounds. It's somewhat immersive, but not as completely immersive. And then finally, non-immersive virtual reality, which is more of the desktop virtual reality, which users interact with the virtual world using their computer. There are some benefits to this, and the reason I'm highlighting the benefits is because I think this is what is best used for the military training that I'm advocating. It can be used without the need to purchase additional expensive equipment. If you think about the size of the military, it'd be cost prohibitive to have a fully immersive virtual reality experience for diversity training. Most military members do have access to a computer, and this this non-immersive virtual reality can be used on other devices such as tablets and smartphones, which makes it easy to access anywhere at any time, which is a very strong benefit for military members, again, who are deployed worldwide. And they're semi-immersive. I'm not sure why that got out of order, but you can see partially immersed in virtual environment, not completely, but it still uses that specialized expensive equipment. All right, so now how does this go with military training? I'd like to give you just one example of how I think that it could be very useful to train in a diversity realm. So a lot of diversity training currently revolves around sexual harassment training, and that's my specialty. That's where I've done a lot of research in the past. So that's what I wanted to talk about for the remainder of my presentation. So with virtual training for sexual harassment training, the learner will engage in several non-immersive, again, virtual reality interactions. In some of those interactions, the learner will interact with other people who are virtual. In other interactions, they will witness people talking, interacting together, both of those or all of them in a virtual world. So they're bystanders in those situations. So the interactions that they're going to be engaging in, first of all, they will interact again with one or more virtual targets. There will be several of these interactions. It's not just one and then they're done. In some of the situations, the targets will be same-sex, and others they will be opposite sex. The target will engage in behavior that may or may not be sexual harassment, so the virtual individual will engage in behavior with the learner, and the learner will have to determine if that behavior is sexual harassment or if it is not sexual harassment, and then again, if it is sexual harassment, what they should do about it. What I think is a little bit more interesting is the bystander. The bystander situation, learners will view interactions between two or more virtual targets. So it'll be like watching a movie almost. Some targets, again, will be same-sex, others opposite sex, and they will engage in behavior. So this is very similar to the previous example I showed you. But in this case, they are not interacting, they're just witnessing it. And I have a few examples that I think will highlight how this might go. So here's an example. John, who is Jenna's boss, tells her that there's an opportunity to present research at a conference. He tells Jenna that presenting the research would look good on her resume and that they would get to travel together to Las Vegas, where the conference is located. With a smile and a wink, he then says, "Don't forget, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." So this is not something that the learner will be reading. Instead, they will view it acting out by virtual individuals. And then after this occurs, they will have to indicate if it's sexual harassment, the severity of the sexual harassment, and what they would do in reaction to that situation. So that is a sexual harassment example. Here's another example that's not sexual harassment. So some of these situations they will witness won't be sexual harassment. At the end of the day, Jenna was leaving the library when she got a text from her boss, John. The message from John asked if Jenna would be interested in going to the local football game. It read, "Hey, I'm going to the Bronco game tonight and I have an extra ticket. Interested?" Now, the reason that there will be some scenarios that are not sexual harassment is because it is important for those who are learning to understand the ambiguousness of these behaviors. And then finally, one more example. Again, sexual harassment. This morning, Jenna's boss, John, told her, "Have you been going to the gym more often? Your body is looking really great." A compliment that some people may not think is sexual harassment, but in the workplace, anything along these lines is definitely not appropriate. So in this case, again, the learner would be watching this interaction occur and then would have to make decisions about the appropriateness of the behavior and their reaction. So, finally, the conclusion here is that educational technologists will play a vital role in this. A lot of these types of behaviors will need subject matter experts. If you think about military training and military environments and the different dynamics with subordinates and followers, it gets very complicated. And without subject matter experts, it could be extremely difficult to do this. So educational technologists will definitely need to work with those SMEs to create content. As virtual reality technology changes, I think a more immersive experience could be implemented. So as that equipment becomes more ubiquitous and a little less expensive, perhaps it could be deployed out to military members, and then a more immersive experience could occur. And finally, educational technologists, a vital part of any training, virtual reality training endeavor, because they know about learning theory. Computer scientists could probably put together this training fairly easily, but without the learning theory to build upon, they may not get the content correct. So that is my presentation for today. I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope that you've had a great semester.